One is the parotid salivary gland, and the structures which are related to the parotid gland. There are three major structures which are going to traverse the parotid gland, and they include the facial nerve, the retromandibular vein, and the external carotid artery. So these are the three structures, three important structures which are going to traverse the parotid gland, and that's why we are going to talk about these structures. Parotid gland also has some important relationships with important structures, so we are going to talk about that too. And the masseter muscle, which is also present in this region. So you have the parotid gland, which is a salivary gland, of serous origin, very little mucus, glands you would see within the parotid gland. It is related with important structures. There are three important structures which are going to traverse the gland. One is the facial nerve, the other is the retromandibular vein, and the third one is the external carotid artery. Okay, so let's look at the parotid gland. And if you see the parotid gland, it has on the superficial surface, it is like a triangular structure. It extends superiorly to the zygomatic arch, and inferiorly it is extending up to the angle of the mandible. The anterior border, you can see it is going up to the masseter, and the posterior border is going towards the sternocleidomastoid, or overlapping the sternocleidomastoid. So the upper part is extending up to the zygomatic arch. The inferior part of the parotid gland is related to the angle of the mandible. The anterior border is more triangular, and it is overlapping this muscle, which is the masseter, and the posterior border is overlapping this muscle, which is the sternocleidomastoid. So it is basically lying between the mandible and the mastoid process. So the area between the posterior border of the mandible to the mastoid process is occupied by this gland, which is the parotid gland. This is the parotid duct, and over the top of the parotid duct you can see another part of the parotid gland, or accessory part of the parotid gland. So this is the accessory part of the parotid gland lying over the parotid duct. Parotid duct is going to go transversely over the masseter, then it is going to pass through the buccinator muscle and will open in the upper part of the oral cavity, just opposite to the second molar teeth. So this is the parotid duct which you are seeing here. Okay, so it's the largest salivary gland, lies below the auricle, occupying the region between the ramus of the mandible and the mastoid process, extend superiorly to the zygomatic arch, inferiorly to the angle of the mandible, anteriorly to overlap the posterior border of the masseter, and posteriorly to overlap the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. And superficially, if you see, it's more of a pyramidal shaped structure. You can see it here. Again, this is the parotid gland. This is the anterior border, which is overlapping this muscle, which is the masseter. Posterior border is overlapping this muscle, which is the sternocleidomastoid. The superior extent of it is to the zygomatic arch. Inferior extent of it is to the angle of the mandible. Now, the main gland, there is a main gland and there is an accessory gland. We have already talked about it. It's above the parotid duct. The capsule of the parotid gland is derived from the deep fascia of the neck. And the deep fascia of the neck is called the investing layer of the deep fascia of the neck. And it splits into, as it's going to reach, because it's like a collar. The investing layer of the deep fascia of the neck is like a collar covering the neck like this. When it reaches to the area between the mastoid process and the mandible, it opens, splits, covers the parotid gland, and then it moves forward. So, investing layer of deep fascia, or the deep fascia of the neck, splits open and it covers the parotid gland, forming the capsule of the parotid gland. And outside and it's a thick fascia, so the parotid gland doesn't have the space to expand, because if it is going to expand, it is going to stretch this fascia, and this fascia is supplied by, in this area, is supplied by a nerve which is called the greater auricular nerve. Okay. So if you have an infection of the parotid gland, for example, in mumps, you have inflammation of the parotid gland because of a viral infection, and it results in inflammation, and as a result, the fascia is tight. And when the parotid gland is going to get swollen, you would have extreme pain in opening the jaw and in this region. So the people with mumps will come in that they are unable to open the mouth, because the same fascia which is covering the parotid gland is also going to go and form the superficial layer of the fascia of the masseter. And masseter is important in opening the mouth. So what you would find is that the people with mumps, you have the inflammation of the parotid gland, you have this thick fascia which is covering it, and the nerve which is supplying is the greater auricular nerve. And if you have painful inflammation, it would be difficult to open the mouth. So usually patient with mumps will come with fever and difficulty in opening the mouth because it's caused extreme pain in the mouth. Its superficial layer is attached to the zygomatic arch and extends to cover the masseter, the deep layer of the cervical fascia, and its deep layer is attached to the mandible, the styloid process, and the mastoid process. So the deep layer is going inside, the superficial layer is going over the top and is covering the parotid gland. A thickening of deep fascia extends from the styloid process to the angle of the mandible, and that is called the stylomandibular ligament, and separates the capsule of the parotid gland from the submandibular gland. It is tense, and swallowing of the parotid gland is painful. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to see the relationship of the parotid gland, because parotid gland is not only what you see on the superficial side, but it is also going deep in, because it's a wedge-shaped structure. So it is between the mandible and the mastoid process and the styloid process. So it's going deep. So it's not only the superficial thing which you see in the front, but if you go in, you would find that it's passing behind the mandible and between the mandible and the mastoid process. All these structures are coming in relationship to the parotid gland as far as it is going towards the pharynx. So superficial, its skin, superficial fascia, greater auricular nerve, and we said greater auricular nerve is supplying the capsule, and any inflammation is going to result in pain there, and superficial parotid pre-auricular group of lymph nodes. Anterior medially, what you have is the posterior border of the ramus and the muscles attached to the ramus, which are on the outer side is the masseter, and on the inner side of the ramus of the mandible is the medial pterygoid. So it's going like this. So it's covering over the top of the ramus of the mandible, and it's going behind the ramus of the mandible also. So it's covering the muscle on the top of the ramus of the mandible, which is the masseter, and because it is going behind the ramus of the mandible also, so it is also related to the medial pterygoid muscle. So the anterior medial border or anterior medial surface of the parotid gland is related to the masseter as well as the medial pterygoid and the posterior border of the ramus of the mandible. So it is related to the posterior border of the ramus of the mandible. Part of it is related to the masseter, part of it is related to the medial pterygoid. The posterior medial part, which is the back, is related to the mastoid process, and it is related to all the structures which are coming from the mastoid process between the sternocleidomastoid and the posterior belly of the digastric muscle. And then it is also related to the styloid process. So the muscles which are coming from the styloid process stylohyoid, the styloglossus, and the stylopharyngeus muscle, so it is related to that. And then next to the styloid process is the carotid sheath, where you have the internal carotid artery, internal jugular vein, and 9th, 10th, 11th nerve. So these are the structures are going to come in relationship to the posterior medial surface of the parotid gland, and that is why any mass in the parotid gland needs to be seen through the pharynx also, because it's very close to the pharynx. So any parotid mass can also extend into the pharynx because it's close to the pharynx. And the medial wall is related to the pharynx. We'll show you this diagram so that you can make out. This is the parotid gland, and this is the fascia covering the parotid gland, which is the investing layer of the teeth fascia. This is the superficial part of it. This is the deep part of it. And then you can see this is the ramus of the mandible, and this is the masseter, and this is the medial pterygoid. So the anterior medial surface, which is this one, is related to the posterior border of the ramus of the mandible, is related to the masseter, and it is related to the medial pterygoid. If we go to the posterior medial border, which is here, you see this is the mastoid process, and you can see the sternocleidomastoid, and this is the posterior belly of the digastric. This is the styloid process, and from the styloid process you have the stylopharyngeus, styloglossus, and the stylohyoid muscles. So they are also coming in the posterior medial relationship. And then you can see the carotid sheath. Can you make out this? So this is the carotid sheath. You have the internal carotid artery, you have the internal jugular vein, 9th, 10th, 11th nerves. These are also in relationship with the posterior part. Yes?
Doctor, how can we
orient yourself? So this is a cross section. We are going to take a cross section from here. We are making a transverse section like this, a horizontal section. So you are coming from the skin here. Okay, in front you have the mandible here. Posteriorly you have the mastoid process, and then as you go medially you can see the styloid process. Oops. So this is the most important one, because this is going to give you the relationships. So what you are seeing here is a horizontal section which we have made from here, okay, going towards the neck. So this is your pharynx. Here, this is pharynx, and this is your skin. We are going from here. Anteriorly you have the mandible, which is here, the posterior border of the mandible. So anterior to the mandible is masseter, which is here. Posterior to the inner aspect of the mandible, ramus of the mandible, is the medial pterygoid. So now you have the anterior medial border of the parotid, which is related to the masseter, posterior border of the mandible, and the medial pterygoid, which is lying on the medial aspect of, or the inner aspect of the ramus of the mandible. We go posteriorly. This is the mastoid process. This is the mastoid process, your mastoid process. Outer to the mastoid process is the sternocleidomastoid. And inner to the mastoid process is the posterior belly of digastric. So you see posterior belly of digastric, and you see the sternocleidomastoid. Then if you go more inner to the mastoid process, you would see the styloid process. Styloid process gives three muscles: styloglossus, stylopharyngeus, stylohyoid. So these three muscles are there. Okay. If we go more inner, you would find that there is carotid sheath, and the carotid sheath has internal carotid artery, internal jugular vein, and 9th, 10th, 11th cranial nerves. Yes.
You said the parotid gland will cover the mandible.
The masseter muscle, it is going to come in front. So this part is coming in front of the masseter. You see this? This is the masseter. So you are now looking at a horizontal section. Let me give you a little bit, go back a little bit. See this one. So this is the mandible. This is the masseter. This is the medial pterygoid. This is your parotid gland. And these muscles are the muscles which are coming from the mastoid process. You see this? This is the styloid process, so the muscles coming from the styloid process. And then you have these vessels which are the internal carotid vessels at the 9th, 10th, 11th cranial nerves. And as you go medially, you are coming to the pharynx. Again, if you can make out this picture. Anybody has a problem with this picture? You have a problem with this picture?
I have only a problem, one problem.
Yes.
The parotid gland does not cover in posterior.
Parotid gland?
Does not go posterior.
Posterior to what?
It's the mandible.
Yeah, so it is going to the mandible because this is the parotid gland, this is the mandible. Part of it is here, but it is not completely, covering the posterior aspect. But it's related. The anterior medial border is related to the masseter as well as it is related to the medial pterygoid. Okay, clear?
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
Isn't that what cranial nerve inside the head?
Yeah, carotid sheath. No, 12th cranial nerve is not within the carotid sheath.
Because it says hypoglossal nerve.
It should not be, because usually the carotid, it is not part of the carotid sheath. The 12th cranial nerve is not part of the carotid sheath. So if this is written here, this is an error. 9th, 10th, 11th cranial nerves, the jugular vein, internal jugular vein, and the carotid artery, internal carotid artery. Okay, so everybody understands this? The anterior medial border, the posterior border, and then you can see the relationship. The medial wall is going to be related to the pharynx. Yes. No, that's an error in the picture. Okay, now what we are going to discuss are the important structures which are going to traverse the parotid gland. We have looked at the relationships. Now we are going to see the structures which are passing through the parotid gland. So there is the first thing, which is the most superficial within the parotid gland, is the termination of the facial nerve and the beginning of the 5 terminal motor branches. So 5 terminal motor branches, the temporal, the zygomatic, the buccal, the mandibular, and the cervical. These 5 branches are going to exit out. First, the main facial nerve is going to enter into the parotid gland, and then it is going to give 5 motor branches on the face: temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, and cervical. These 5 branches of the facial nerve are the most superficial structure within the substance of the parotid gland. The other important structure is the termination of the superficial temporal and the maxillary vein. So superficial temporal is coming with the superficial temporal artery, and the maxillary vein is coming with the maxillary artery. Both of them are going to unite to give rise to the retromandibular vein. And this retromandibular vein, when it is going to exit out from the parotid gland, is going to divide into an anterior division and posterior division. Anterior division will join the facial vein, the posterior division will join the posterior auricular vein. So the second important structure, or the middle structure, the superficial is facial nerve, then you have the retromandibular vein, and the deepest structure within the parotid gland is the termination of the external carotid artery. So external carotid artery will enter into the parotid gland, divide into the maxillary and the superficial temporal artery. Maxillary artery is going to go into the temporal fossa and then into the infratemporal fossa. The superficial temporal is going to go up into the temple. So there is maxillary and superficial temporal. These are the terminal branches of external carotid. These are the deepest structure within the parotid gland. So within the parotid gland, you have 3 major structures: the facial nerve and its branches, then formation of retromandibular vein, and the third one, the deepest structure, is the external carotid artery, which will divide into its terminal branches within the parotid gland. And then you have the deep parotid lymph nodes embedded within the substance of the gland. So this is how you are going to see. This is the facial nerve, entering into the parotid gland.